So timbre, yeah, is a word that describes the tone or quality of sound, and this lesson's focusing on the different timbres of the orchestra. So we know that from last week's lesson, there are 4 families of the orchestra: strings, brass, woodwind, and percussion. And within that, there are different instruments. And you'll have seen in last week's lesson how those instruments and the families of instruments have grown over time. Remember, we started with Baroque, that was a very, very small orchestra, right the way through to Romantic, which, all the way through to Modern, which had over 100 players in it. And each one of those players has its own timbre. Each instrument has its own timbre. And we're going to look at using a bit more research to look at those particular instruments and how they sound. So on Classroom, I'm going to just load up your Classroom now, somehow, if I remember how to do it. There's my group. And there's Mr. Jones's group. Oh, Mr. Jones's group is doing really well. Look, they've got loads of people compared to us. Well, on Classroom, you have an assignment loaded up. So posted a new assignment, the Orchestra Lesson 3. And again, similarly, you have your work digibooks here that you're going to submit to me when you've completed this task. So here's what it looks like. There are 2 tasks. One is to research any instrument of the orchestra, importantly of the orchestra. If you're struggling, go back to last week's lesson or the lesson before and figure out an instrument from the orchestra. You can do violin, but you can do the more obscure instruments like the bassoon. Nobody does the bassoon, mainly because nobody likes the bassoon or bassoon players. But have a look at it and see why. Am I going on about bassoon so much? Your finished piece of research should be represented as a fact sheet with pictures and text. It can be done in this workbook, or if you want to do it on paper and upload it to this workbook, you can. You just copy and paste it into that slide there. And what to include in your research project: what materials is your instrument made of? What does your instrument look like? Find a picture. Try not to draw it your own. I'd probably just find a picture on the internet. What the various parts of your instruments are called. You can label it. How it's played. Is there more than one way of playing it? For example, a trumpet. You can put a mute in it and dampen the sound. There are lots of things you could do with it. How old is your instrument? When was it invented? Did it evolve out of an older instrument? The piano, for example, is that an evolved form of the harpsichord? And which section of the orchestra does your instrument belong to? So you're going to fill that in and put that on that slide there. Task 2 is similar to last week, where you had the different types of orchestras and you went in and you listened to a piece of Baroque music. You chose a Baroque composer, listened to a piece of music and answered questions. You're going to do something similar based on the families of instruments in the orchestra. So you're going to look at, let's say, the strings, for example. You've got a list of pieces down here from the more older pieces to things within the last 20 years. You're going to put the name of the piece. So let's say I'm looking at the Verve. Oh, what's about the Verve? It's the Bittersweet Symphony. For the spelling today. Word. The Bittersweet Symphony. That took a while. My bad. So Bittersweet Symphony. The artist is the Verve. And then think of a word to describe that text, the timbre of the music. So is it rich? How would you describe it? How would you describe timbre? If you're struggling, Google ways of describing timbre. And then I dislike this piece of music. So your opinion of that music. Then you need to choose a second piece. So I've chosen the Verve. I might choose Vivaldi Concert for 2 violins, make it a little bit older, and explain how it is different to the one you've already chosen. Now, looking at how it sounds, how the music is different, tempo-wise. So here, you could be looking at tempo, timbre. So you've already described what that means. Dynamics, I'm sure you know what dynamics mean. If you're struggling, remember the elements of music song. Pitch or style. Those sorts of things you can look at in that box there. Once you've done it for, let's keep that there. Once you've done that for strings, you go on to woodwind. Again, choose 2 pieces, fill that in. Same for brass and same for percussion. Once complete, click submit and send it to me, and I will go through and I will mark them. Bear in mind, I will mark and have marked stuff that you've submitted in the last couple of weeks. I'm going to stop recording so that you can crack on with the work. Once I've finished recording, a couple more instructions will come your way, so I'll just hold fire.